So I've really enjoyed all your, read lots of your stuff on Medium. And what I've
Mm.
loved about your books and your writing is it's such a practical invitation into freedom. And I love this new one, Personality Isn't Permanent. I think it's a very powerful book. And I think it has great power to break some negative mindsets like poverty mindset, victim mindset, passivity. And I really enjoyed it. And I think what impacted me most was it made me remember a long while ago, I was in a lecture and the lecturer said personality essentially is permanent. And I remember having a debate because I felt so locked into.
A lot of people have said that. Let's just say, a lot of people have said personality is permanent. A lot of psychologists have even said that. It's pretty
And
interesting, isn't it?
it is. And I had this debate because I felt locked in and I knew there was something in me wanting to get out. And I thought, I can't accept it's permanent because there has to be ability to change. So I'd love to know your story. I mean, I've read your story on Medium, but some of the people who are watching this or listening wouldn't know your backstory and how you came to write this book.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, goodness. Well, I'll give like a little snapshot of who I am right now and kind of share briefly how I got here. So my wife and I, we live in Orlando, Florida. We live in Florida because my wife loves Disney, to be fully honest with you. We have 5 kids. We adopted 3 of them from the foster system. We've got 2 little twins as well. My wife's actually pregnant with a 6th, so it's a little crazy. That'll probably be our last. And I got my PhD in organizational psychology last year. And while I was doing that, I did a lot of writing, which allowed me to be very successful in my writing. I was very lucky. My work's been very widely read. But the reason I write books like Willpower Doesn't Work and Personality Isn't Permanent is because I'm very much a big believer in change. I believe people can and do change. And I've experienced a huge amount of change in my own life. I came from a pretty rough background as far as, when I was a young boy, my parents got divorced. My father became a drug addict. And, I just went through a lot of instability for most of my teenage years. And I ended up serving a church mission at age 20, which blew my mind, which just exposed me to so many things. I read lots of books, learned about my own spirituality, helped a lot of people, did a lot of journaling, got help, a lot of therapy and a lot of help from great leaders, and just watched myself change. And that's what led me into psychology. Also, one other quick note is that my father, during that mission experience, he actually overcame a lot of his addictions. And I've watched him and my, people around me go through big changes as well. So I just want to help facilitate that in others.
Yeah, and I think that's what I get from your writing your books, this invitation that overcoming.
Yeah, it's totally possible and doable, and it's meaningful, and that's, I think we all want to. Maybe we've been told we can't, but we certainly can. And there's ways to do it.
So one of the themes in the book is obviously about personality profiling tests and tags and labels and why that isn't helpful or even harmful. So what have you experienced in terms of personality tests, and what kind of made you come to that conclusion that they're quite harmful?
Yeah. It's interesting. When I was doing when I was doing my PhD in psychology, one of the things I heard from all my professors was that type-based um, tests like Myers-Briggs, overly categorical tests, are just not necessarily a good way of viewing personality. I now understand better why, personality is more of a spectrum. You would never actually call yourself an introvert or an extrovert because you're never actually one or the other. You're actually semi both. And in different situations, you would reflect more in one than the other. So personality is a lot more contextual. It's not just one thing and one. And those tests are also just like not good, valid science. They force you into a certain choice. Like a lot of those tests, they'll give you like 4 options, and sometimes none of those options apply. Whereas like if you actually look at any validated psychological measure, whether it be on personality or on grit, usually the questions are on what's called a Likert scale. Have you ever heard of a Likert scale?
No.
A Likert scale basically gives you like an option out of like 5 to 7 where you're given the choice of like doesn't apply or like fully applies. And you can like answer somewhere in the middle so that you can actually say, this doesn't fit me at all. But most of the tests like Myers-Briggs, they force you into choices that often don't fit. But my major concerns are not necessarily their lack of science. They're bad, totally bad science. I'm just going to say that flat out as a psychologist. type-based tests like Myers-Briggs, DISC, Enneagram, they're not good science. I understand why people like them though, because people like them because they give them a sense of identity. You can then have a new story to explain, I'm an INFJ, or I'm a blue, or I'm a white. They allow you to explain yourself and understand yourself. The problem is that identity often becomes fixed. Identity and personality are two different things. Your identity is your self concept. It's how you describe and explain yourself. And often people, when they've made something such a big part of their identity, they seek to defend it, to confirm it. They become, your identity or your label becomes tunnel vision. So it stops you from seeing all the times you actually aren't that person. So these things just lead to a fixed mindset, but they also stop you from wanting to become someone different. Rather than trying to be someone new, you're actually trying to just defend your current story. So they very much create a fixed mindset for people, and they stop you from learning. Who you are today is not the same person you were 5 or 10 years ago. I think most people would agree that they're not the exact same person they were 10 years ago. So as a result, who you are today shouldn't be viewed as the same person you were 10 years ago. You actually were a different person, even 5 years ago. And maybe if you're someone who's gone through a lot of learning, a year ago, or even 5 days ago. And so you shouldn't view your current and your former self as the same person. They were different. You should have empathy and compassion towards your former self. For example, me and my 11-year-old self, who couldn't really cope with my parents' divorce, I can give that former version of me compassion and empathy because I'm not the same guy anymore. And I would do things differently. But that same principle applies to your future self. You should not view your future self as the same person, because they will be different. They'll have different perspectives. They'll be in a new situation. They'll probably be more mature and be able to do things differently and focus on different things than you would. So because of all that fact, labeling your current self and being so definitive in how you describe your current identity and being so solidified in who you think you are today is bogus, because you're going to be different in the future. You're different from who you were in the past. And so you shouldn't be so convinced of who you are today, because who you are today is pretty temporary. Even in 5 days or in 5 weeks or in a year from now, you're going to be a little different, especially if you're seeking growth. So that's one of the major problems with labeling, is it makes you focus so much on the present, which Carol Dweck and others have found leads to a fixed mindset.
So what would you say to people who might be, they might be in a rut? They're discouraged, they're lacking a sense of confidence, they're repeating cycles again and again and again. They might not be able to articulate, I've got a fixed mindset, but their life is...
No, yeah. And most of us wouldn't admit it, even if we've got one, which we all do in many degrees. Yeah, so to the person who's in a rut, which we all are in many respects, it has a lot to do with the story that you're telling yourself. It has a lot to do with the meanings you've given to former experiences, like just as an example, we've all gone through failures or hardships, but it's really the meaning that you've given to those failures and hardships. You could tell yourself that situation, because it was painful. We've all gone through painful experiences in the past, and those painful experiences often shape our story. Whether it's trauma or just any negative experience, we can tell ourselves, we can avoid doing difficult things and choose to be defined by something from the past. And if you're ready to get out of the rut, you've got to stop being so defined by who you formerly were. And you've got to, get back to thinking about who you want to be in the future. The best ways to do that are, first off, to journal. I think journaling is crucial. Journaling about where you're at right now, what you're dealing with, that you are in a rut, and that you've got to kind of admit it to yourself, and explaining why you think you're in the rut, explaining your former, and just writing about it in your journal, but then also talking about it. When you get your emotions out of yourself in the form of language, when you actually talk to people, journaling is one way to turn it into language, but talking to people and turning it into words allows you to see it differently. It allows you to see it in a form. Viktor Frankl, but also many others, have said that emotions cease to be suffering when you give them a clear picture, or you give them a clear form, and you actually do that through talking about it. Once you're talking about it, you can then change it. You can kind of change how you view it, change the meaning you've given to it, see it from different angles. You've gotten it out of yourself, which requires huge courage and vulnerability, but that's how you can actually start to rethink it and maybe choose to give it a different meaning. I'll give a quick example. Like literally last week, actually, I guess in this case it was last week. Last week I had a huge failure, just to be fully honest with you. I was giving a presentation to a group that I'm a part of, and I just totally bombed the talk. I felt very embarrassed because this was a group of people I really respect. And because of my embarrassments and just feeling so horrible in the moment, I was starting to make some snap decisions. And in the embarrassment, I was thinking I probably need to leave this group because the group isn't helping me and I'm not helping the group. I was just coming to all these conclusions based on the emotions of the moment. Like in psychology, we talk a lot about how there's initial reactions and then there's hopefully a secondary response. We all have initial reactions in our emotions. In my case, I was very embarrassed. But the key is not to be defined by your initial reaction, which in my case was embarrassment, and to not make decisions based on your initial reaction. Instead, you want to actually take the time to regulate it and to think about it and to say, what would be the best thing I can do because of this? And always is the case, you need to openly communicate what you're dealing with, what you're going through. That allows you to start to kind of get alternative perspectives because your own feelings are not facts. And just as an example, I started to share with the person who led that group that I was really embarrassed and that I think I probably might need to leave the group. This is a group I've been a part of for several years and have been an amazing contributing member. He's like, dude, Ben, what are you talking about? He was able to kind of talk some sense into me a little bit, but also I was able to talk to other people and get alternative perspectives so that I can think more of like a 360-degree angle on this rather than just my emotions. And then ultimately I chose a meaning that would allow me to have more options in the future. Because usually when you're negatively impacted and you're caught up in your emotions, you usually make decisions that limit your options in the future. In my case, it was, I need to leave the group because I can't be effective in this group anymore. That's a very limiting future that I was creating for myself based on my emotions. And this is usually what happens to people. Instead, I thought, basically you get to choose either this happened to me or this happened for me. If I chose to view it that this happened for me and that this was actually an amazing experience, and I'm literally just choosing the meaning I'm giving to it. This was actually an amazing experience. The group doesn't hate me. In fact, they love me. And it was good for me to make this failure because now I can learn from this and get their help in the future. Like, I'm not defined by this past. I'm actually defined by what I choose to do in the future because of this. Then all of a sudden I had all the options in the world of what I could do. And so I just think, you've got to go back to hope in the future. You've got to have options in the future. And that what that requires is that you actually have to start thinking about what you want in the future. You got to actually choose who your future self is and not be so limited by the past. And that's crucial for all of us. But openness, vulnerability, trust, that's how you start to feel safer so that you can then start to build your confidence and courage.
Because a lot of people are using this app. The goal of it is that people start dreaming about their future.
Your app.
Yeah.
I love it.
And dreaming about who they want to be, what they want to become, money they want to give away, jobs they'd love to
I think it's brilliant that people are choosing to plant these ideas in their heads.
Yeah. And it's a powerful thing. Once you're saying is when we have a label, like I'm an introvert,
which just isn't true, by the way. No label is always true.
Yeah. And it opens up freedom to start imagining, actually, no, I can be on this spectrum. I can be at times extrovert. I can be at times introverted. I can externally process. I can internally process.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you're saying with the dream thing. I mean, I love, Albert Einstein said imagination is more important than knowledge. Obviously you've got to imagine your desired future self. You've got to imagine those dreams because your thoughts can become things. But what many psychologists have found is that most people, they don't spend that much time imagining the future. Therefore, they can't really predict it. Instead, we spend too much time defaulting to who we've been in the past. And you don't need to do that. You can actually spend lots of time imagining the future. I do it all the time. Writing in my journal about my future self, who I want to be in like 3 to 5 years. And then telling people about your goals, telling people about your dreams, being open and honest about it, not being shy or afraid. One of the reasons why people actually like labels is because labels are stable. They're safe. If I told you, I'm an introvert, just as an example, or that I'm not very good at writing, then I would never have to be required to actually fail because I could just show up and, but if I tell you about my dreams, then I might mess up. I might not make it. And that may, and so people, it takes courage to put yourself in a position where you might actually fail. And so it's really easy just to say, this is who I am. This is my label. You don't have to expect anything beyond that of me. This is where I'm going to, this is my comfort zone. I very much view personality and comfort zone as the same thing, and so this is my comfort zone. This is where I'm at. This is what's consistent. This is what you can expect of me. And that allows your ego to feel really good, because then you're not going to fall on your face and fail. You're just going to, but to try something new and to tell people about your dreams and goals, which you haven't yet done, takes huge courage. But courage is how you build confidence. It's pursuing courage, being in uncertainty, trying new things, failing. That's how you become flexible. That's how you create new options. That's how you create new experiences versus just staying in your small, narrow box.
This is very liberating. And the challenge is, say in Christianity and the church,
Mm-hmm.
is that it might not be personality tests, but it might be statements like, which are true: I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, or there's a race for me to run, or so it can be this idea that there's something discoverable, innate.
Sure.
God
I'm
created.
Christian as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this is a conflict of perspectives. You can either view yourself as, this really comes down to the core ideology of the person. Is, do you believe you were made a certain way, or do you believe you were or do you believe you are the literal child of God that has the capacity to learn and to grow and to change through Christ? If you believe that through Christ you can change and expand and become more like Christ, then you're not defined by who you currently are. And so, I know a lot of people, they think that who they are made to be is who they always will be and stuff. And my belief is that the atonement of Jesus Christ allows you to transform. I think that that's evidenced through the scriptures.
Yeah. And I agree, because I was even thinking, coming up for this interview, when you look at some of the qualities the Bible says, put on this and
put on attributes, right? Change.
Yeah.
I think that that's what it's inviting us to do, is to become more like Christ. And that the natural man, the carnal man, needs to be reframed or rebirthed, right? And that's something that's an ongoing process. And so I think that obviously everything what I'm describing is, psychology, but I think Christianity points to, it encourages us to become different from who we are today and to maybe put on more of a saintly character and more of a transformative character, where faith allows for miracles and transformation, and that you're not as limited by what's human. And so I think that the gospel encourages a bold thinking and faithful thinking, and it encourages us to change our personality. If you're someone who's dark and angry, you should probably become someone who's patient and loving, in that who you were in the past should not be who you were in the future. One other brilliant thing, since you brought up Christianity, is that the past can be redeemed, that who you were in the past can be forgiven and changed, and that it doesn't mean everything. The guy on the cross doesn't always have to be the criminal, right? In the future, he could be someone in paradise. And so you're not defined by your past.
Yeah, it's very powerful, because I think the thing with the app is we just talk a lot about the relationship with God as a two-way street.
I love it.
God's got things to say, but he's also wants to hear from us.
I think it's a collaboration, and that God makes decisions with us, and that he allows us to make choices.
So there's some stuff you mentioned about authentic self in the book, and this permission to write about your future, what you'll be doing, how much you'll be earning, how you dress, who the people you'll be mixing with, the kind of influence you'll have. I think that's a huge permission that, coming back to, say, Christianity, a lot of Christians would struggle with that kind of ability to think about the future in that way.
Yeah. My belief is that faith is not a passive belief. Faith is very much a principle of action and power. Belief and faith are different. If you have faith, you're actually doing something. And, you're also built, including the power of God, because your faith is in God. And so it's not your power, it's God's power, but you're acting, you're using your own agency to act, and you're involving God to do it. And so you're obviously seeking his help. Ask and you shall find, or, seek and you shall find, ask and it shall be given to you. You're asking, you're getting grace, which is additional help. So I think that, it's not all you, without question. I think if you're seeking things, just as an example, like I prayed very much over this book. I asked to have insights that I wouldn't have gotten, or to be led to certain places, but I was the one who was asking to get that help. I had the goal to write a great book. And I then asked God to help me accomplish that goal. And so it's not all me, but I am still the one making my choices. And at the end of the day, we all do become who we choose to be. And we can choose to involve God in that transformation process or not. And I would recommend people involve God, because he could make us a lot more than we could make of ourselves.
Yeah. And that's the interesting thing about your book, is it produces people who are very giving and sacrificial, and not kind of self-centered people, but self-forgetful people who have, maybe their purpose is higher than my own actualization, but I want to do something good through my life for other people.
I believe in purpose. I believe in choosing a purpose, and I think we can choose higher level purposes. The purpose that I would choose right now may not be purely at the level that God would, have me do it, but hopefully in the future, I'm a little bit more inspired and I can choose a better purpose. But I think that purpose is important. Viktor Frankl, have you ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl?
I've read a lot of it. Yeah.
It's a goodie, but he talks about how without hope and without purpose for your future, the present becomes meaningless, and then the suffering in the present becomes unbearable. And so for me, I believe that purpose and your future and your goals, even if you're a Christian, that could be to go live with God again, whatever that is, your purpose should be the thing driving your decisions today, not who you think you are, not your personality, but your purpose should be the thing driving your behavior. And your purpose can actually become the thing that becomes your personality. My wife and I, we adopted 3 kids. We now have 5. They're very much becoming my purpose. I'm not just going to say the switch flipped, like I'm learning how to become a better father. It's a gradual line upon line process. And so, yeah, but my purpose is very different than it was even 5 years ago. I think my purpose is now a lot more oriented towards God. Hopefully in the future, I can say the same thing about myself. And, I think that it's a growing process. I think we're here to learn and to grow. I think that there's a reason we're here. And it's not just because, it was a mistake. I think that this is part of the learning process that God wants us to go through to become more like him.
And I like the quote in the book where you say, your future self is an acquired taste.
Don't you agree?
I think I do, because as you move towards your future, it's actually uncomfortable and challenging.
It's uncomfortable and maybe not even fully satisfying to your current self, right?
Yeah.
But it's what's best, right?
Yeah. And I think linking back to this tags and labels, and I think you mentioned that in the book, that it's very easy to say when it's uncomfortable and it doesn't taste good and it's not immediately gratifying, well, I've just not got that trait, that innate ability, so I can quit.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that growth is hard. It's difficult, it's painful, and therefore you've got to learn to want it. You've got to learn to want what you currently don't want, because right now what you want may be to the detriment of your future self. Maybe right now what you want is to eat donuts all day because that's what tastes and feels good in the moment. Maybe what you need to learn to want is to eat the carrots and whatnot, but that requires, in the beginning, maybe you don't love it. It's right, but you don't necessarily want it. But you can train yourself to want it by engaging in it, by choosing to see how it connects to your future self, by giving it better meaning. I have to admit, the first year when my wife and I were foster parents, I didn't want it. Intellectually, I thought it was a good idea. It matched who I wanted to become in the future. It resonated with my values. But if I'm just honest with with my emotions, I didn't want to be there. But I've had to develop my desires, develop my tastes, develop my preferences, so that being with my kids is what I genuinely do want. It's actually who I am. It's not just in my head anymore. It literally is in my heart and soul. It's it is my now identity. And therefore it is what I seek and feel like I crave and need. And you can choose that. You can change what you want, but it is an acquired taste. And you've got to go through the process of acquiring that taste.
And accept, I guess, that as you're acquiring it or stepping into new things that you're not comfortable with, that
you're not going to initially want it.
And you're going to fail.
Yeah.
A lot more.
Yeah. And you've got to admit that. I think that's why the journaling and that's why the openness is really important, is to just say your future self isn't who you are today. You're not that person yet. That's okay. That's where you want to go. That's where you want to be. And it's okay that you're not there yet, and you will fail. You'll make mistakes. You'll revert back. But if you're open through the process, that this is what you're striving for, and if you get supportive people around you, and if you're not hiding your failure or hiding your true desires or hiding your true goals, then you will be able to, over time, integrate into that process and into that person. You'll be able to eventually become that.
And it's interesting, I can't think of the guy's name in the book, but the guy who's in prison, he's,
Andre Norman.
yeah, and he's going up the hierarchy of prison, and
Mm-hmm.
he has this aha moment, and he settles on a purpose to do with Harvard. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
get to Harvard.
Yeah, and because that's where successful people come from.
That was according to his current knowledge,
Yeah,
right? He didn't, we set goals based on what we know about.
yeah. But it's almost that was enough, even that purpose, it almost feels like he's randomly plucked something out of the air to give him a purpose now, instead of violence, to go for something new. So can it almost be at the beginning, okay, it needs to be a good thing, but that purpose doesn't need to be something that you stress and struggle with?
Yeah, I think that this is something that people struggle with, is that they think they've got to have all the answers before they can move forward, before they can act in faith. And I think that I think there's that quote that says "one step enough for me" or something like that. There's that quote or whatever, that song. But I think you need to have a semi-direction about where you would like to go, a good direction that you feel like would be more resonant with who you want to be or the life you want to create. And as you move forward, you're going to learn a lot. By stepping out of your comfort zone, by actually exposing yourself to new situations, new people, new knowledge, new information, you're going to see that your former goals were actually quite limited by what you knew before. And so now you can take the direction and maybe redirect and set better goals. And that's actually that is the goal, is that we can set better goals. Hopefully my future self can set better goals than my current self, because hopefully my future self has better perspectives, more knowledge, more, hopefully, the quality of your goals in many ways reflects the quality of your current identity and your current pursuit. And so, yeah, your goals are going to change over time, but the only way for you to actually change and refine them and improve them is to be moving towards something, exposing yourself, learning, failing, having emotional experiences, asking for help. Yeah, and as you build confidence by acting courageously and watching yourself do small things or maybe even big things, you realize, oh, I can do much bigger things. Maybe you'll start to exercise more faith because you've watched yourself exercise faith in the past. And so, yeah, you definitely want to keep learning and growing.
And one of the things you talk about is that what trauma can do. So, and I love the fact that you describe trauma. It can be an incredibly traumatic event, but it also can be the trauma of almost the drip of negative words, negative conclusions, negative assessments of you. So what do people do with traumatic events? Because we come across this a lot, and I guess I come across a lot in my own story. You go back to words that were said, and it still is impacting your current identity, words that were spoken decades before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you need to, one thing. So, for example, if someone spoke very negatively to you or if someone hurt you, one really helpful thing is to kind of zoom back on that person and give them a little bit more context. Why were they acting the way they did? Like usually we're just looking at the behavior that they did, which was not nice. Like it was not the most beneficial behavior. But if you zoom back a little bit with more understanding and try to understand more their context, right? Why they were doing the thing that they did, then you can have more empathy and compassion towards them and realize that they were in the wrong place themselves and that they're not bad people. They were doing something stupid because they were in their own issues. And if you can zoom back and understand the context of everything going on, you can let go of the meanings that you held. You can let go of the anger or the resentments that you held, because you can give that person a little bit more space and realize that they're not fixed either, that's where they were. Hopefully they can be different in the future as well. I mean, I had to do that with my father. My father was an extreme drug addict for most of my teenage years. And that created a lot of instability in my life and, really caused a lot of problems for me and my younger brothers as well. But he, like I mentioned already, he's not that same guy. He's overcome his addictions. He and I are great friends. But one of the things that I needed to do to better understand that situation was I had to ask him all about it. What led you to those decisions? And you might not be able to do this. Maybe the person that hurt you is no longer available to speak to. But in asking my father what happened and what led him to those decisions, I learned a ton of things that I could have never known about my dad. him being adopted, him being bullied, the situation with my parents when the divorce happened. I mean, he was going through a lot and he was doing his best to cope, and that led him to, various negative behaviors, which I can fully understand why he'd do that, because I've done the same thing in certain, maybe not those exact same behaviors, but in my own stress, I've done things that weren't the smartest either. And so, you want to have more understanding leads to empathy and compassion. And so you want to get more understanding. If you can't get that directly from the person, you can just think about it in different terms. Like you can try to think about it from a more empathetic, compassionate perspective of your former self and also the people around you, so that you can choose a more healthy meaning that you give to the event. You can choose that this happened for me, not to me. You can choose to say, this is something that I can use. I'm not going to repeat it, but I can have a better future because of it. Like, I genuinely believe that all of the negative things that I went through in the past are all benefits. I think it all happened for me. If I had not gone through all that stuff, I wouldn't have had such a transformational missionary experience. I wouldn't have chosen the wife that I got married to, because she'd gone through a lot of trauma herself, and we knew that together we could really accomplish a lot of things. I wouldn't have chosen to be a foster parent of 3 kids. I wouldn't have chosen a lot of the things that I'm now doing, which make my life better and which also allow me to serve and help other people, if I hadn't gone through those experiences. And so, of course, I can choose to frame it as this all was a benefit. This was all a blessing. It all happened for me. But that's a choice that we all have to make. We all have to choose the story of our past and choose how we view it, and even in certain instances. And if there's various instances from your past that were particularly painful and negative, remember, you had an initial reaction, but you also have a chosen, meaningful response. And you can even now, in today's moment, choose a different meaning and a different response for something that even happened 10 years ago. I'm doing that right now. I'm choosing to look at my past right now, that it was an amazing experience. I'm grateful it happened, even though it was crazy and I wouldn't have done it again. It was freaking hard, terrible. Looking back now, I'm very glad it happened. But that's my choice to view it that way.
There's a quote in the book that says we shouldn't be a former anything, and that sometimes we can be defined by a successful moment, a talk we did that was amazing, and then we just fix on that. How do you keep it fresh so there's always new vistas and you're always going further, higher, there's always more?
Well, I like the quote from Dan Sullivan. He says, always make your future bigger than your past. And, bigger doesn't have to be like more successful in like worldly terms. It could be bigger and better in different areas, areas that maybe matter more to you now. But yeah, I think that it's always good to think about, it's always important to have a purpose. Viktor Frankl says this, and I just couldn't agree more. You have to have hope and purpose for your future in order to even have meaning in the present. You've got to be actively preparing for something. If you're not actively preparing for something in your future, then you're probably not living very effectively in the present. So the question is, based on where you're at right now, not based on what's comfortable, not based on what you've done in the past, even if I've been a successful writer in the past, my question for myself today is, what is the most meaningful, purposeful, important thing that I could be preparing for and striving for right now? And so for me, that's future self. My future self in a few years from now is going to be doing different things than what I'm doing now. I'll continue to be writing books, but I definitely want to be doing more missionary related things. That to me is more meaningful than being an entrepreneur for me. But getting to this point for me was what I wanted to do and what I needed to do in order to help me get to where I wanted to go in the future. I'm learning things. I'm putting myself in a financial situation so that I can do what I want to do. And so it comes in stages. Sometimes you need to go through chapters 3, 4, and 5 to get to chapter 6. And so it's also about being strategic. It's about, I got my PhD as an example in a very strategic way. I felt like that was something that I needed as far as the education, but also the credential in order to enable me to do various things that I wanted to do in my future. So you can't always skip from A to Z. Sometimes you need to actually think about, sometimes your future self, if you're at stage B, is your future self maybe at stage C, and you got to think, where do I want to be in a year from now? Sometimes you can skip those steps. You don't have to do it in a traditional way, but sometimes you got to, it can be nonlinear, but also you got to kind of think about it as, where do I want to go? Like, I guarantee in like 2 or 3 years from now, once I get in many ways where I want to go, that I'll then be able to make better decisions about who my future self is even then. But I think you need to always be driven by a purpose and have hope in the future. Hope is really, really important. And having something that's future oriented, that allows you to actually focus and make intentional decisions on the present. That doesn't mean that you're not present. It doesn't mean you're not appreciating the moment. It doesn't mean that you're not smelling the roses and enjoying it. It just means that you're actually doing something with yourself. It means you're being intentional. It means you actually are working on things, whether it be with your relationships with your kids, your relationship with God, working on a project. You kind of have to have a purpose as a person, or else you kind of lose it. You just start distracting yourself. You go into an unhealthy state.
And you mentioned that about gratitude or being thankful. I think it's in the book as well, the power and the science behind gratitude.
A lot of it. Gratitude's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful way to reframe anything. I mean, if I'm choosing to be grateful for my past rather than angry about it, even grateful for my hard lessons learned, changes everything. Grateful for my future, grateful for my present. Gratitude's such a beautiful experience. It's something we all need more of. It's such an incredible, powerful thing.
So I'd love to ask you a bit more about your journaling. Because obviously someone's got this passion, this purpose, they're going towards it, and they're going towards their future self, and there's aspects which are hard and challenging to do that. Well, how do you use your journal just to keep getting courage and confidence and to keep moving forward?
So amazing. I love journaling. I journaled today. I think I don't have like a clear structure, like I don't use like a 5-minute journal. I don't have I just write in it about what's going on in my life, what I'm learning right now, some good moments. Like this morning when I wrote my journal, I wrote about 3 great moments that I had yesterday with each of my kids. Like there were 3 good learning moments yesterday, and I wrote about those and just thought about how I can be better in the future. I think a key aspect of journaling is kind of when you do it, where you do it, how you do it. So like for me, I like journaling in the morning without all of my technology around me before I open my email. Because when you open up your technology in the morning and you start putting stuff into your brain, it gets your brain going in a certain way, and that can stop you from getting clarity and insight and from meditating and stuff. And so for me, I like waking up in the morning, drinking a bunch of water and stuff, I actually go straight into my car and just drive. I drive over here to my office, but once I park, I again don't open up my email and my social media. I just, pray, meditate, get myself in the right frame of mind, and then I just journal. I just write about what I'm learning, what I'm excited about, what my goals are, what I need to do right now, what I'm committed to. And while writing in that frame of mind, you can get a lot of insights, a lot of insights from your subconscious because of just what it's been doing while you've been asleep. You can get a lot of insights just from being in a quiet place. Ryan Holiday recently wrote a book called Stillness is the Key. And I think it's just about being in a place where you can actually get insights. I actually did get an insight even this morning, just because I gave myself the space to do it, about someone I needed to reach out to, a guy in my local community who I just need some help from. But I wouldn't have gotten that insight if I didn't give myself the space to journal. But I'm always thinking about writing about who my future self is, my goals, but mostly my journaling, aside from just listing my goals, is very much focused on what do I need to think about or what do I need to accomplish today.
And I guess as well as you're remembering what you have actually achieved, is you talk about it increases your confidence.
Yeah. One of the things I do in my journal is definitely reflect on former wins, So I have questions at the beginning of my journal, I'll probably actually just show you. I've literally got a stack of journals below my computer. So here's one of my journals. And in the front cover, I've got questions. You won't really be able to read them, but on the cover of all my journals, I answer 5 questions. Where am I right now? Just basically, I just write a snapshot. So in this case, this was back in January, I have an amazing new home office for writing and videos. That's this place, 4 part-time employees on my team, in the middle of relaunching a course, finishing Personality Isn't Permanent. This was back then, you know what I mean? And so this just gives a snapshot of where I'm at. And then I say, what are the wins from the past 90 days? And so I just write a bullet, a list of bullets of what are the things that I've accomplished in the last 90 days. That allows you to actually notice and see the growth that's occurring. That's going to be personal or professional. And then what are the wins that I want for the next 90 days? And I just write, what are the things I'm trying to accomplish in the next 90 days? And these are all just bullets, there's not a lot here, but it's who's my future self in 3 years from now? And what do I want to accomplish by the end of this year? And by having that in the front of my journal and just by looking at it, and I go through about one of these every month. But by looking at it, I can say, here's where I am now. Here's what I've recently accomplished. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's where I really want to go, which is my future self. And here's where I want to be at the end of this year. It just allows me to frame my situation, and then I can write in my journal based on my vision of my future self and have confidence that I'm moving forward.
How do you go about kind of reframing, rewiring the subconscious so it's, working for you, not against you?
Yeah. You want your subconscious to have momentum towards your future, not momentum towards your past. And so that requires, they talk about shaking the snow globe. Like you want to have experiences that kind of reawaken your growth oriented, so you've got to step into new situations, basically clarifying who you want to be, like through your journal, through your imagination, is one step to kind of signaling to your subconscious that, but that's not enough. Beginning to tell people about where you're trying to go and your goals is a really powerful signal to your subconscious, because your subconscious is on a deeper kind of belief and identity level, and it's habitual. It's you on autopilot. It's very much where you're at right now. But it's also just a very powerful tool. Our subconscious is very powerful, and it will take you wherever you want it to go. And so, but you've got to train it, and so that's why you need to take time to imagine and think about your future, but also your behavior really can impact your subconscious. Also your experiences. You can have what I call subconscious enhancing experiences, where you see something, you're in an environment where you have an experience, and then it kind of changes how you view everything. It changes your goals, as an example. I've had experiences where I've put myself in various environments, where I've learned certain things, and I've been like, okay, I'm not going to be the same person anymore, and so you want to have new experiences that can hit you on the emotional level, because your subconscious is more on the deeper emotional level. Thinking about your goals is enough, but actually if you're having gratitude and having experience and putting yourself in the moment of future experiences, the more emotional you can make it, the better, the more experiential, the more bodily. You actually want to feel it, not just have it in your head. That's why sharing your goals with others and having it be courageous, and courage is how you upgrade your subconscious. Courageous actions that move you forward, new experiences that teach you, those are how you upgrade. And just intentional actions towards your goals, over time they build your confidence, which opens your subconscious and allows you to keep moving forward. So it's literally just about setting your normal. Your unconscious is you on autopilot. And so you want to have the you on autopilot be your future self. And you do that through updating your identity, through sharing your goals, through starting to act as your future self, and starting to make that what's the expected norm. And then having environments and situations that reflect who you want to be, so that eventually that's just what becomes you on autopilot.
Which I guess in sort of the biblical thing of, be transformed, be metamorphosized by the renewing of your mind, or take every thought captive, make it obedient, is
Sure.
I guess
Yeah, I think make your subconscious obedient to your dreams or your goals. It sounds pretty cool to me. That sounds kind of cool. Yeah, because your subconscious, kind of, you could view it as it's almost, I wouldn't say it's the natural man, but it's because it's such a powerful tool, but it can hold you back if you don't let it free in a lot of ways. That's why I like journaling, is because journaling allows my subconscious to be being free and thinking about where I want to go. But it is very emotional though. Like we all have emotion, we're going to try to keep ourselves safe. And so to do something that requires courage, you're going to try to avoid that. So you, in a lot of ways, have to go against that. Your input and your chosen constant information inputs, but also your food inputs and just everything coming in, that stuff shapes your subconscious as well. And so like, I'm very weary, and I pay attention to what I'm listening to or reading, because I know that stuff can hit me and impact me on deeper levels. And so I try to be discerning and aware. And so when I'm listening to really good stuff or reading really good stuff, that can inspire me to get clarity about decisions that I could make, which would reorient my life in a more powerful way. So just as one example, it's becoming more and more clear to me as Benjamin Hardy, that I want to increasingly prioritize my wife and 5 kids. And like they're a pretty big priority in my life. Like I don't work after 2 p.m. as an example. Like I go home, but like I just feel more and more that needs to be increasingly my focus. even more than it's been in the past, which would mean that my career is less of a focus than it's been in the past. But that's choices that I'm making based on my knowledge, my beliefs, my values, and they're refining. But I'm choosing these things based on insights I'm getting through journaling, stuff I'm reading and listening to, experiences I'm having, observations I'm having, also just thinking about who my future self really is and how committed I really am to that future self. I'm getting more and more committed to the person I really want to be. And I like the statement, which I share in the book, that commitment is a statement of what is, So, you're committed to something based on what you already have in your life. And I'm getting more and more genuinely committed to the things that my future self, the person I really want to be, which is my future self. So I'm watching that process unfold. I'm watching myself get committed to the person I genuinely want to be. I mean, I remember for 5 years, from 2010 to 2015, I wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't doing anything that would actually open up that as being a possibility. In around 2015, which was when I was in my first year of my PhD program, I finally started to say, okay, I need to actually learn how to do this. I'm going to actually start reading books about how to become a professional writer. I'm going to actually start learning what's required. And so I started to actually get more serious about my goal, which is, for 5 years, it was just this thing that I was hoping to one day do, but was never actually engaging in, was never actually doing anything about. And so it's like, you need to start doing something about it if you're serious about this future self.
And then, like you say, you don't necessarily need to know all where it's going to go.
No way.
Just do something.
I mean, when I launched this book, I knew a lot less than when I'm launching this book. And in 2 or 3 years from now, I'll know way more than I do today. My future self's going to have a lot more knowledge and expertise and understanding, and I'll be able to make better decisions in the future. And so you have to move forward. And you don't get so attached to, one of the reasons, honestly, that I didn't write for so long is because I was worried about being wrong. I was worried about saying the wrong thing. And now I look back on my old blog posts and stuff, and even Willpower Doesn't Work, and I say, I said a lot of things that were wrong. And I know that even right now I'm saying a lot of things that are wrong, but my future self will be better because I'm doing this. And if I don't do this today, and if I'm not creating stuff and not moving forward, then I'll never actually become someone who could do something better. You get better through the process of moving forward, not through just one day appearing. And so I could have never written Personality Isn't Permanent if I hadn't written Willpower Doesn't Work. And so you have to move forward. You've got to create imperfect work. You got to take imperfect action. And that's what ultimately grows you into the person who could do better stuff in the future.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, man, you have an amazing day. It was a huge pleasure.
Well, thank you so much. It's good to meet you.